Now, it's time to take a look at the Punisher Navy. I have to say, this might be the best looking Navy frigate at the moment, since the red and metallic grey color look epic on this cute little frigate. And it does look definitely unique in its own way. I love it. Even the lasers are also colored. I mean, the laser turrets have the same color pattern on them. So definitely a big thumbs up for the color option, for the paint job on this ship. But of course, we are here to test out the ship's performance, so let's take a look at the trait description. Robos plus 20% small laser activation time, minus 20% damage control reactivation delay, plus 6 seconds damage control activation time, minus 20% warp drive signature radius penalty. Alright, pretty good. Expert small laser operation bonus will give you plus 35% small laser damage, minus 10% small laser capacitor need, plus 75% small laser tracking speed. Should be a decent damage increase. Expert frigate command bonus probably will give you plus 4% armor resistance, and you also have the expert electronic warfare bonus, which will give you plus 5% scan resolution and plus 5% send strength. Overall, pretty common and very similar to the raw bonus of the previous two Navy frigates. Now, the Punisher Navy has 3 high slots, 3 medium slots, 3 low slots, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. 5,570 is the total defense. Now this is of course primarily a armor tank. It already does have good default stats, and you also do get a bonus on top of it. So overall that looks to be really solid. And the capacitor on this ship is the best capacitor out of the currently available Navy frigates, 933 gigajoules. 2040 is the recharge time, 9.72 gigajoule per second is the recharge rate, it can lock 5 targets. Now, speed-wise, it is not slow, but it is definitely not the fastest Navy frigate. The Rifter and Tristan are definitely faster, but the Punisher Navy should be much more tankier because it does have that very nice armor resistance. So, let me show you the build. So, my friends borrowed me the ship so that I can do a video on it. So this was, I believe, his build. Now I will show you a lot of different setups. I'm currently using C-type small pulse lasers. They have a very nice optimal range. I always loved the range of the small pulse lasers, and the laser range in general is one of the best. It also has some decent tracking. Now in the medium slots, you can use the classic Scramble Plus dual web setup, although you also have the option to use a tracking disruptor, guidance disruptor, or even a dampener. It really depends on the situation. And in the low slots, you can use an afterburner or a micro warp drive, and a damage control is always a very nice thing to have, especially since you get a bonus for damage controls. And in the remaining slot, you can add a medium armor repair, a armor plate, a small armor repair. It really depends on what type of ship you want to have. Or you also can do a DPS build and add one heatsink. Since you know frigates are not really meant to take damage, although the Navy frigates definitely can take a hit, especially this one since it is really tanky. And here you can take a look at the armor resistance. Looks really good for default stats, and yeah, I'm really happy with the numbers on this thing. They look awesome.
Undocking.
So let's undock and let's see how this boat looks on. Let's see how the active stats look. Now, as already mentioned, the Punisher Navy is definitely not the fastest, but you know it is still fairly speedy. 11,090 hit points, 78, 72, 68 and 65% resistance. 1.6 km per second is the afterburner speed. I mean, the difference in speed isn't that much. After all, I'm using the same setup as with the previous ships that I showed you. and 32,000 hit points with the damage control active, and it will last for about 19 seconds. The cooldown is 120 seconds on the damage control. Now, as I already said before in one of the previous videos, I believe that they will buff the Navy frigates. I believe that they'll add a bit longer activation time on the damage control, and I believe that they will change how the shield regeneration works on these ships. I mean, the new modules are kind of made to be used with these new frigates, and these new ships should really shine when you start to use the new armor plate or the new shield extender, which does enhance the passive regeneration or basically enhances the armor even more. So it's the new modules are very interesting, but currently they're not available on the market since no one is doing PvE. Everyone is doing PvP inside of the Cobalt Air system. Now, as I mentioned before, you can do a lot with that one slot. Now, since the Tanky Navy has such a good capacitor, I would actually recommend that you go, if you like an active tank, then a medium armor repairer would definitely be the way to go. Now, for this to work, you have to change the rigs a little bit, since it's a frigate. It has a decent power rate, but in order to fit a medium module, you definitely want to have maximum skills, and you also want to change some of the rigs into powered rigs, so that you can use one of the medium armor repairers. And honestly, if I were to change the rigs a little bit, it would work really well. And as for the nano core, you only have one, but as I already stated in the previous videos, they will allow the older nano cores to be used on the Navy ships. It is a little bit bugged at the moment, but it will be fixed down the road. In that one medium slot, you can use a small Nosferatu. A small Nosferatu on frigates does work really well with the combination of using a medium booster or a medium armor repair. Now, armor repairers don't use that much capacitor, so you can keep the armor repair running for quite a while. You can also use a small armor repair, but I simply prefer the medium one if you already have a lot of power left. If you specialize the build for an active tank, you can easily slap a medium armor repair, and you can even enhance the armor repair with the general unit. The thermal circulation implant also works really well on this ship, although if you have the laser implants, use them, since they have a greater effect on the DPS. But if you like tank, the thermal circulation implant is definitely the way to go. Now, for a kite build with beam lasers, you can use the classic combination with a long range disruptor. Even a scrambler can be used against short range frigates. A tracking disruptor or a guidance disruptor will work really well. Even a dampener works against larger targets. You can replace the scrambler into a long range disruptor. If you really want to go long range, then that would be the way to do it. But you also can have a defensive scrambler just to turn off the scrambler, to turn off the microwave of any ship that might get close, so that they are slower and you have much better tracking on a slowed down target. You can use this build with the web as well, works equally as well. Now, in the low slots with a kite build, a micro warp drive is definitely the way to go. You also do have a signature radius penalty reduction, which is always helpful to maintain a small radius once the micro warp drive is active. The smaller the signature radius, the harder it is to hit the ship. Now, for a passive tank, you can add a armor plate, but again, I would actually recommend to use the new armor plates that have been added in the recent update, since they have a much smaller power requirement and you can easily oversize. They also do have some other effects on the hull, but the armor increase should be quite exponential if you add the new plate, and they don't have the same mass effects on the mobility of the ship. You will remain speedy even with a big big new armor plate, but the current older armor plates have that weight to them, which does reduce the top speed of your ship. And since this is a frigate, you definitely don't want to reduce your speed, since speed in most cases equals life. A slow frigate is usually a dead frigate. That's one thing to keep in mind. Now, since I'm just using a placeholder beam laser, the DPS is nothing, but if I were to use E-types, the DPS would be really good. However, this ship is quite speedy with a macro wardrift. Definitely not slow. Definitely not slow. It goes quite fast, and it can even be faster if I were to use a macro wardrift unit, and if I were to use better rigs and a better macro wardrift, I could definitely get about 4.2 km per second out of this ship, which honestly is by no means
Docking
slow.
request accepted.
It is a speedy ship. Not as fast as the Rifter, but you know, it's still quite fast. Now, one thing that I kind of don't really like is the fact that I can't use a tracking computer. Unfortunately, they do require a lot of power for some reason, but you can always do a dual propulsion build, and this can work really well. Basically, if someone does turn off your macro wardrift, you have an afterburner, and this also works well with the pulse lasers. You will have higher DPS with the pulse lasers. Of course, works interestingly well even if you're using beam lasers, if you do get scrambled, so you can take distance from the target. Overall, there is quite a bit of options to go with on these new ships. Now, I know someone raised the problem with the price, and I'll come to that a little bit later. Now, you can technically use a medium neutralizer on this ship, since you already have a lot of power. You can easily take advantage of that and basically have a large neutralizer equipped. And with this build, you can also use a small capacitor battery in the low slots, just to match the capacitor usage of the neutralizer, so that you don't cap out yourself. But you know, a very interesting kite long range build with a neutralizer is definitely possible on this ship. Again, some change to the engineering rigs have to be made in order to make the build work, but it is honestly a interesting idea. Ships that have a big capacitor can easily take advantage of oversized neutralizers, so that you can take out the capacitor of your target. Without capacitor, most of the ships are not going to do much, especially the tank ones. Even frigates. Frigates without capacitor are usually dead. And you can also do a build with the heatsink. This is basically the build that the ship came with, and I like it. The Punisher Navy does have some very nice DPS if you have the laser implant, if you have the skills. You can definitely get some very nice DPS out of this ship. And honestly, I do like the Punisher Navy so far. It looks okay on paper. However, I feel like the Tristan Navy is definitely a bit more dangerous, since you do have the bombard implant. And if the bombard implant was, let's say, nerfed, if it were nerfed, then it would definitely change some things. But for now, let's see how the Punisher Navy will perform. Now, I have the thermocirculation implant equipped, since I don't have the laser implant anymore. But if you have the laser implant, whether it be pulse laser or focus laser or focus crystal, then you should definitely use that. Now, I have to say, the lasers on this thing do slap. That's some very nice damage, very nice alpha damage on shield. And one thing to keep in mind, lasers are excellent against targets that are shield tanks, since lasers do a lot of damage on shields. Basically, full damage will be dealt on shields. The damage on the laser damage does drop quite a bit on armor, since armor has high resistance, and overall you will be shooting them on thermal when you're shooting them on armor. So the damage does go down quite significantly, and in most cases that is not going to be a problem. But you have to keep in mind that a armor tank target, especially a target that's armor tanked and that's using a reactive armor hardener, they will be able to tank enormous amount of laser damage. Good example is a Revelation built for tank versus a Apocalypse fleet. Apocalypse striker fleet that's full with implants above level 30. Those Apocalypse strikers will not do much on a properly armor tanked Revelation on armor, since their 20,000 DPS turns into 200 DPS on 98-95% armor resistance. So it's very important to know which targets to pick and which targets not to pick. Now in Frigate PvP, in the hands of a skilled pilot, the Navy frigates are really tanky if we compare them to some of the other frigates that we have. Even if the other frigate has some down level of DPS, you still have a very good tank on these ships, especially with the damage control. And if you have an implant combined with a good tank, you will be able to melt those frigates quite easily. Now I know the Voyage core ships will keep running, but if you can, I mean, you can also kind of chase them, since you're also kind of fast, so it's kind of difficult to escape if you are being chased by a very fast Navy frigate. Honestly, we'll have to do some tests to see how that situation will work, but from what I've seen so far, these frigates are definitely tanky, and down the road, as I already mentioned a couple times, I do expect them to be buffed, since I have seen some concern from players that these things are a little bit underpowered, and I can kind of see what they're talking about. There are some aspects of the ship that definitely does kind of feel underwhelming. However, if you build the ship in such a way to basically make those, let's call them weak spots, being not so notable or not so obvious, then these ships do perform really well, since in the end it really does depend on the player on how their ship will perform. I mean, my friends hunt faction frigates in tier 4 frigates and they kill them easily. So in the end, it all really depends on the pilots of the ship. The ship can be good, but in the hands of a bad pilot, the ship is not going to perform really well. And that's the beauty of EVE. You can make a lot of weird ships perform really well if you have the right idea for them. A good example for that would be the bait logistic cruisers that are built for PvP. Basically, you don't expect well, nowadays you actually do expect a combat loggy, but back in the day, a combat loggy was a surprise, and I love the idea of a combat loggy. I remember one of my first encounters with a combat loggy was in null space. I think I was with the Balgorn. I kind of forgot. I think it was a Hurricane logistic, and I was in the Balgorn, of course. There was no match for the Balgorn at the time, but when I killed the ship, it was honestly I was surprised, since back then the fitting philosophy was different. Now, in some ways, the old builds still perform really well. However, a lot of things has also changed over time. Implants have significantly altered and changed how the dynamic in the game worked. Now, for the most part, a lot of implants have been nerfed. Of course, I still say that there is still a lot of room for more nerfs, and I am all in if they want to nerf all implants. A 90% nerf, I'm happy with that. I would be happy with that. That would actually make things more or less back in their own place. When I say that, I mean things will definitely be back in a more, let's call them a more balanced way. But you know, small steps, and with a lot of small steps, you have a big step. So back in the day, a Macariel had like 60,000 DPS. Now a Macariel has 15,000 DPS. Still a crazy amount of DPS, but you know, 15,000 DPS is a lot better than 60,000 DPS in terms of balance. So yeah, even the Apocalypse Navy has been nerfed as well. The Apocalypse Striker, not Navy, with the Focus Crystal. The only implant that is unchanged to this day is the Bombard Tactic. That one implant is the same ever since it was released. Doesn't mean it will be the same. I mean, I know for a fact that they are now looking into nerfing it. But yeah, that's one of the only implants with its original damage output. Everything else was nerfed. So that's a little fun. I already mentioned it a couple times, but I still think it's a very fun fact that the Bombard Tactic is still the same Bombard Tactic from a couple months ago, from when the implants were originally released. Kinda interesting how that goes. I always like to compare and look at things from a lot of different angles, and so I like to experiment with all of them. Now, as for the Punisher Navy, I think this might be one of the more stable ships that I have flown so far. When I say stable, the Drifter was in some cases way too fast for its own tracking. The Tristan was also a little bit too fast with the blasters, but with the railguns it performed really well. But the Punisher Navy has a very stable 6-kilometer orbit, and that's basically its optimal range on the laser. 6.3 kilometers is the optimal range on the pulse lasers, and they seem to be hitting really well. Does do some really good damage, stable damage. And overall, the Punisher Navy seems to be handling the best. And when I say the best, there's a lot of factors to include. Some ships are just, you know, way too fast for the tracking. Some ships, in some cases, are slow. This ship seems to be just right. Now, of course, having a lot of speed always nice, and I like my ships to be fast. I mean, I used to be one of the pilots who wasn't flying a ship unless it was going like 2.5 kilometers per second, like minimum. Back in the day, I used to be very uncomfortable with slow ships, and I learned to fly the slow ships with the Dalgorn, and I got comfortable flying slow ships with the Revelation. But it's always nice to come back to a fast and mobile ship. Very happy that I still can fly them. I mean, it would be kind of funny if I was unable to fly these things. Although I do have some issues though with my ping, since the ping can make playing a frigate very uncomfortable. If the ping is really high, then you can't really pilot the frigate properly, since the ship will just go all over the place. And one of the main reasons why I haven't been flying smaller ships, well, when I say smaller ships like frigates and stuff like that, is because of my bad internet. The internet just made it literally impossible to pilot things into PvP. But I'll definitely, I mean, I already kind of flew the Tristan into combat, into PvP, and one of the next videos will be a PvP video. Still trying to get some more fights going, but should be out this weekend, hopefully. I mean, it's Saturday actually. Yeah, it is weekend, so it means that it will be released probably the next couple hours, probably tomorrow, I don't know. But in any case, a PvP video is definitely coming up ahead, and it will be fun to see what happens until then. But so far, my thoughts and my experience from flying the Punisher Navy, it's a very nice boat. Definitely does feel different and has its own character, since it uses lasers, and lasers in their own aspect, in their own way, are very good and very unique weapon system. I mean, lasers are still one of the players' most favorite in in the game. So with that being said, that was the Punisher Navy. Again, a very fun to fly frigate, and I had fun flying it. So if you want to try one out, then go ahead. Definitely going to be a very fun experience. And with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.